you so much for joining us as we celebrate another trailblazer, pioneer, sexual liberator, agitator, advocate, activist. I am so excited for this interview for many reasons. This is going to probably be the longest interview that I do. And there's a plethora of reasons for that. First and foremost, let me just say, Vi Johnson, Mama Vi. Do I have to say more? Okay, got to get that out. I am honored to be here to celebrate Black History Month with someone who is not only a true historical figure within the Black community overall, as well as the leather community, the kink community, a person whom has absolutely inspired me by her humility, by her contribution, by her selflessness. We have Viola Johnson here. And I'm like, not going to get emotional at all about this. And we are actually honoring her. NCSF, National Coalition for Sexual Freedom, is honoring her by this, acknowledgement for Black History Month. Also, we are going to talk about our award that we created in her legacy, the Vi Johnson Liberation Award. So I will let her introduce herself to y'all and say whatever she likes. Her vast bio, or her bio, is going to be attached to this, but Vi, introduce yourself to the audience.
Ruby, for me, there are few important things, and so in no particular order. I have been mom, then grandmom, and now great grandmom for a lot of people in this tribe. And that is an incredible honor for me.
Okay.
In, again, no particular order. Okay. I'm one of the 8 original ONYX Pearls. We were the women who stood by our men in the very early days, when a whole lot of them were getting slings and arrows from a community that didn't yet understand the need. They do now, but they didn't way back then. I am the wife of 48 years to the first Black IMSL, International Ms. Leather. And last and certainly not least, I'm the Senior Griot, and I use that term very specifically, and the director of the Carter Johnson Library. And the rest of it, while it's wonderful and my community has most assuredly given me those roses, they're not as important as those things.
Oh, that is beautiful. Oh, just grandmother, mother, wife, historian, director, just all of those beautiful roles, And I am just like, I just have to know what inspired you, just looking back to where this journey began. And that's a really broad, big question. But inspiration to me is like the fuel of activism and advocacy and putting the next foot forward. What fueled you? What inspired you?
That the greatest fuel was actually my partner. Okay. It was chasing Jill's fantasies.
Okay.
That we discovered our kink. And then finding the fledgling Eulenspiegel Society, now called simply T.U.L.S.A, walking into that first meeting scared to death, Ruby. And the first face I saw was a Black man. And he is the one who greeted us. Now, would we have probably become active members anyway? Yeah. But seeing that strong, handsome man standing in front of me, head to toe in leather when we were barely kinklings, saying, "Come in, little sisters, your home, it is where it all began. It's the cornerstone that this house of Kink is built on.
Okay.
Other wonderful inspirations have been so many of the people that I've been privileged to know through the years and everything they stood for.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many I can't even really begin to list them. The two wonderful Leathermen who took us in, Tom and Jerry McNichol, now long deceased, found us at the number 7 Stonewall March. We were marching.
Okay.
And was astounded to find little sisters who were out and proud. And they helped us along that journey.
When was this?
That was Stonewall 70. It was either 77 or 78. And marching in that march and seeing other Leathermen mostly, but not exclusively, who were proud of who they were. There were the, oh my stars, they're the historians that have become friends. Some now long gone. Tony DeBlas, one of the few men I ever called daddy, who was not just a friend, but also a mentor. Dr. Gail Rubin, who is also a friend, who reminded me that my love of history wasn't a negative, it was a positive. Go get it, go find it, help her find it, and preserve it. For good or ill, there was a book burner that I met in 2007, who also, in a rather strange and convoluted way, inspired me to guarantee you don't get to burn my kids' history. There have been all of the young Kinklings who have come up behind me. Maybe there are thousands of inspirations. My club brothers in Tulsa, my sisters in the Lesbian Sex Mafia, when they were first forming. Their creators, Joe Arnone and Dorothy Allison, who I'm proud to call friends. Mistress Mir, who is still a good friend, who I served, and watching and being privileged to be a part of her charity work and all of the things she did, not just for Leather Women, but for the greater community and her fundraising. This list could go on until tomorrow, and I'd still be singing praises of some of the people who helped me on this journey.
Wow. Just the history. I remember watching your YouTube video, and you give a more detail. If just anyone, do yourself a favor, go to YouTube and put in Mama Vi and pull up that video. And I'm sure you've read that video's out there, but it's like I look at it and hear the detailed history, and I'm thinking about you said 1977, 1978, and I'm thinking about how Black queer feminism, all of that was kind of making a shift in that time, and all that was happening around that. And you were like, I'm like thinking, this is another layer of history that just clicked for me in this interview, that the level of liberation that you did at that time is all together kind of set the stage.
Ruby, I am going to add a bit here. With any person who finds that their life has become history, and it's funny because I was talking about this last night with a group that I do once a month. History is judged by the future, not by the present. In the present, you're just doing what you do. It's the generations that follow you that decide if that's historic. Now, I say all of that to say, I was birthed by a woman who said, never be ashamed of any choice you make. If you are, you've made the wrong choice. When she embraced my partner, she simply said, "I have 2 daughters." That was the end of the conversation. When I told her I was kinky, she laughed and said, "How do you think you got here?" When I walked in public to the grocery store, wherever I was going, with that collar locked around my neck, I didn't think about it. It's not that I was making a statement. It was my wedding band. It was my second wedding band that was around my neck.
Mhm.
If somebody didn't like it, not your relationship, fuck off. It wasn't that I was trying to make a statement. I was simply living my life.
Mhm.
And in the clarity of hindsight, because hindsight is 2020, doing it and simply existing without apology freed a lot of those coming after me to do the same thing. But was it a plan at the time? No. I was just being me, honoring my husband, doing all of the crazy and kinky things we were exploring together. There was not an intent except to be proud of my relationship.
Wow. Wow. And the level of, I guess, in the broader, with the other kinklings, as you a budding kinkling at that time, and everyone who was watching, not realizing other people were watching, and that was where the work was being done, is in the people witnessing your journey. Wow.
Far more than me. All I did was keep my head up. It was those who have come after me that made the decision to honor themselves by refusing to deny who they were, and could do it with a little bit more courage because somebody had done it before them.
Wow. Just integrity, authenticity, and grace. These are the words that are just floating in my head right now. This is amazing. So I know I gave you this question, and I don't know if you just answered it with the inspiration, but those Black historical figures overall, who has inspired you, not inspired you, who was most influential for you of a Black historical figure?
If someone gave me the gift of unlimited time to sit down with one person in history, while I would love to sit down with Jessie Norman, she's a crush, the person I would spend an hour with would actually be Harriet Tubman.
Okay.
Part of that is familial because I come from a long family line in Jersey that founded its own town, and they were a harbor for runaway slaves, because where's the best place, I should say, to hide a Black slave? It's in an all-Black town.
All right.
But Tubman boldly seized her freedom and could have gone on and lived an incredible life, a free woman with skill. She was a seamstress. But she went back again. All right, she went back to get her family. She put her life and her freedom on the line to go get her family and give them what she had. Massive doses of respect. But once her family was free, she went back again and again and again, risking her life to bring people she didn't know to freedom. And that is one of those deeds that I can't even wrap my brain around. The Bible tells us the greater love hath no man than this, that he lay down his life for a friend. But she did it over and over and over again. There's no more amazing courage than that, to continue to risk your own life, to give someone you don't even know the gift of life itself, because that's what freedom was. And I want to know why. I want to know what was in that woman's head. I want to know, with every problem she had, because she was subject to seizures and could have passed out at any moment and awaken hours later, 2 states over and behind bars. Why did you do it? What was inside you? What gift did God give you? Why? Why did you do it?
Right. Oh my gosh. Yes. I didn't know that piece about the seizures.
At a young age, and I can't remember all of the details now, she ended up being hit in the head with an iron, and I believe it was an iron anvil that actually split her skull because she had the dent in her skull until she died.
Mm-hmm.
And it left her subject to blackouts and seizures that could occur at any time, that she had no control over.
Wow. Because you're the done a few interviews this month, and you're the third person who has mentioned Harriet Tubman, but your reason is absolutely it's the first I've heard of the laying down of one's life, putting it that way, and then coupled with that quote that's from the spiritual aspect of it. And so once again, the steadfastness in what influences and inspires you is amazing. It's like, oh, this is your life. It's kind of like you were just living. Truly, this is you living and not thinking necessarily about who is going to impress, who is it going to do what to. It's just you're simply living, and the power comes in the living authentically. Like Harriet Tubman, she was just doing what she knew.
Would that I had her courage.
Yeah.
Um,
So tell me, like with the Carter Johnson Library, because for many that's like so much. So tell me about the inception of that.
there were a lot. There were actually 4 little steps to that, but I think the last 2 are probably the most important. First and foremost, I ran into a book burner in the very early days of eBay. And the little town that I lived in, because I lived in a town that was wired for high-speed internet as an experiment fairly early on.
Oh, interesting.
In the early days of eBay, we could all talk to each other. Now, eBay censors that now, but you wanted to email somebody or go back and forth over books or talk to friends about what they liked. Nobody thought about it. I was doing a presentation back then called the Leather History Show and Tell, where, for an hour, I would pass around books and magazines going back to the 1800s and tell stories about them and how they influenced me. And I joke with people about, if you hear what I'm saying, you're not doing it properly because your head should actually be down in a book, because these were being passed out. I wanted people to hold them. And a book that I wanted came up for sale on eBay, and I knew if I bid on it, I probably couldn't afford it because it would go out of control. So I sniped the guy for a book, won the book that I wanted, and, was kind of doing the happy dance about it, and then went to talk to him because I'm figuring if he's bidding on this book, he knows where others are. Maybe he can help me find stuff in my price range. He, on the other hand, thought that I was what he was, and buying things that were considered not fit for the children to destroy them. It was a pretty rude awakening because I foolishly believed we were finally past book burners. I was wrong. And then a few weeks, about 6 weeks after that, I had to be down in Atlanta for one of my favorite events back then called Southeast Leatherfest. And I ran into a young man who he needed somebody to talk to, that had an appreciation for books. And he told me that there had been a book burning in front of his store. And we finished our conversation, took about an hour. I remember going back up to my hotel room and screaming to the heavens. I was shaking, crying, angry, Ruby, And I swore right then, you don't get to destroy my kid's history. I'm an old history teacher. You destroy the history of a culture, you have destroyed the culture. Because 2 generations later, they're not going to know you existed. That means for those who would come after looking for people like them, when they find none, they're vulnerable. Especially our next generation, who is locked into the internet anyway. And if I can wipe it out with the push of a button, then I can make you believe anything I want, including you're sick, you're degenerate, there's something wrong with you, or worse, go kill yourself. And far too many of our kids are. So you don't get to do that with my kids' history. Some little genderqueer in bum Iowa who believes that he's the only person around can at least clock into the library and realize others have been here. They've walked this path before you. You're not alone. You never have been. And draw some kind of strength from that. But if the powers that are making these choices now to book burn, and you don't want to get me on that subject, are determined to first ban it, and what usually comes after banning? Burning. Not with my kids' history, you don't. Not with my tribe's history, you don't. And thank God I've got a supportive family, half of whom think I'm crazy, but they appease the old lady anyway. And an incredibly supportive partner who have watched this crazy collection being built, have watched scholars come to it, have watched our tribe spend time in it, doing everything from flipping through magazines to seeing images of the people that are just like them. And it reminds them that they have leather ancestors. It reminds them that they're not alone. And it reminds them that all that they are, and all that they are, is the next step in an incredibly long path.
Amazing. Amazing. I would love to, after this, maybe get some names of people that you think I can add to this month to do some interviews.
There are some awesome next gens. All right, now, okay, I'm bragging because some of them are in my extended leather family, but there are some amazing next gens coming up behind me that I am so proud of.
Well, I would love to get their names so I can add them.
When am I going to get you down to the library so that you can stay in the scholars room for a few days?
Oh, yes, anytime.
The center, the library is in 2 buildings. And the center, which is the newest part, helped me fulfill a fantasy for me.
Okay.
I have always wanted to be able to stay in my library, in my local library when I was a kid. And wouldn't it be wonderful if they could just lock the doors and I could be there all night and just read? And when we created the second building, instead of filling it full of books, one room was left open and turned into a bedroom for young scholars, so that somebody wants to come in and stay in the library for a day or two, isn't bothered with a hotel bill. You know, most students can't afford it. Most of us can't afford it. Now, it may not be the swankiest digs, but it's
a bed.
Bed, kitchen, because you're in your own house, kitchen, bathroom. You have family all up and down the block. It's jokingly called Library Lane. And the young scholars that are in the scholars room get the keys to both buildings. So while you're there, if you want to fall asleep in the rare book room, you know, at some point in time, Robbie will come go, has anybody seen Ruby? Oh, don't worry, she's fine. She's asleep in the scholars room. Well, give me a favor, tiptoe in and cover her up with a blanket. She'll be okay. Put a little cup of tea beside her. She'll be fine with you.
Absolutely, yes. Yes, after we have some things to talk about after this, most definitely. Most definitely. And so, in addition to that, you mentioned, I saw on Facebook recently that you made a post when you received an award from the task force gave you an award 10 years ago or 11 years ago.
10 years ago, last weekend, actually.
Yes.
Uh, wow.
Yes. Tell the world about that.
Just wow. I got the letter that the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force wanted to honor my work. And when I kind of picked up my jaw and reset it, and sat there, crying like a baby while I was looking at this again, making sure that it wasn't my imagination. The next day I got a call, and they were telling me about the conference Creating Change, which I had heard about because the conference itself is legendary. And that I think I was the third or fourth to receive the award and the first woman. Chuck Renslow had received it before me. Dave Rhodes had received it before me of the Leather Journal. And I believe Ray Spannon. I may have that order wrong. And that it was being created specifically for leather advocacy that crossed into the greater community. And I would need to give an acceptance speech.
How huge is that?
Then when I sat and actually thought about it, because my writing is kind of sporadic. I write the way I think. It really is stream of consciousness. And if it's not ready to come out, I can't force it. But when I sat and thought back about everything that the task force had done in terms of standing between us and hatred, raising the money to defend this community, regardless of color and regardless of how we practice, I realized it wasn't a speech I needed to give as much as it was a thank you. Now, what I didn't realize was that each person to receive the award gets an escort onto the stage.
Mm-hmm.
The men and women that stood behind me, and there were almost 100 people behind me as my escort. And you can tell, thinking about that, still brings back the most awesome memories. I looked at those faces and I knew just about every one of them.
Wow.
They had been either friends, siblings, or youngins who were standing on that stage with me. And as the task force honored me / my work, they were actually honoring all of the men and women that encircled me, because they were the ones I was fighting to keep this history for. And I hadn't thought about it until the speech just began to roll out. When I lived in Oklahoma, and Jill and I were there for 10 years, I was smuggling books back and forth, books and magazines across the border. I wasn't thinking about it. It's just that I was working in Los Angeles and living in Oklahoma, and there were a lot of things that couldn't be shipped by mail. So I would come back with a trunk full because my brothers and my Kinklings couldn't get it. Did I realize I was building a library? No. Did I stop and think about its impact? Not really. My kids needed it. I had the ability to get it. When I talked about breaking into the 93 March, and that's a long story, the leather contingent, it wasn't because I was trying to make a statement. It was because it was 93 degrees that day. The contingent was all in leather. It was hot, and my siblings were beginning to pass out. You don't get to pass over us again. I'm breaking into that parade. And since I was one of the banner carriers, a friend of mine, a woman named Tala Brandeis, was willing to do something for me without question. And when Tala started to swing a rip, the parade marshals backed up. The minute they backed up, we fell in line with the banner, and 5,000 people fell in line behind us. Was I trying to make a statement? No, I was trying to keep too many more people I loved from passing out from the heat. They knew those actions and they honored them. And looking back on it was pretty awesome. And as I spoke they were projecting an image over my head, which I didn't realize until they showed the pictures. And the crowd began to stomp, and the stage began to rock. And it was one of the most awesome and humbling experiences of my life. I was with my family, and wow. Just wow.
Wow. Oh, wow. That is a beautiful story. That is a beautiful story. And, you know, you mentioned getting that award, and this is going to be a segue into the award that was created in your legacy. Our DEI committee, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee for NCSF. I am the chair this year. And so we were tasked with creating what we want it to look like, because this is the first really year of it. And I was thinking that we do have a Race Bannon Award.
Yes.
And you received it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, we need an award that represents the BIPOC community. We want to amplify those voices in the LGBTQ community, and who has been a person who exemplifies the mission of what we want the award to represent. And you were the first person that came into my brain, because that YouTube video is what came to my brain, and just it made no sense but to have the GOAT.
First of all time, I am.
Okay. And so that's how the award came in. So we have the Vi Johnson Liberation Award, and it's for a person who is a sexual liberator and has fought for the liberation of how people live, love, and experience life. And so we're launching that award next week. And so we're going to launch it during Black History Month every year. And I'm actually going to push to have it be a cash award for someone's contribution in some type of way. And so I just want to tell you, thank you so much. And I'm excited for all of the people that are going to be nominated.
I can think of at least 20 right off the top of my head.
Yes, bring it on.
You know, this next generation, not just my leather generation kids, but I'm watching my grandkids moving in a world that I work to understand. I didn't say I always agreed with or really even understood. I asked them to bring me into their world. And I'm looking at the work of people like Jose Gutierrez with the Latin community, or
Mhm.
Phoenix Two-Spirit, who has set up scholars and scholarships for Native American youth to find their own path in their own way. I look at some of the work that's being done by Taisha Best, or of one of my young ONYX siblings, Elimination Huza, in standing in town halls bravely and stating their purpose. And this isn't even talking about my generation of men like, well, everybody talks about Mufasa, but of all of the men who founded ONYX, or of some of our next generation teachers. I'm looking at the work of people like Goddess Indigo, who's writing and stating her truth and being out there for women of color, or of Midori, who is one of the few Asian writers we have. I'm looking at how these youngins are boldly changing the face of what we do because it's for us, by us.
Yes.
And
Yes.
watching it is so exciting.
Yes. Yes. And I'm so excited. Yes. There's so many people who need to be honored, and this award is actually creating the structure to where their voices are honored and highlighted. And we need it so much. And the recognition is so important.
Yes. Yes.
It is so important. And it puts a presence, right? It makes it visible. And I think that's what you do. You did simply by walking in your life, and people actually got a chance to see themselves become present.
Yes. And the funny thing is, I hadn't thought about that until my truth came back and stood in front of me one day.
Tell me about that.
Another very humbling experience. The 1991, I was at a Living in Leather, and it was being held in Chicago, the NLA's, Natural Leather Association's premier event. And I came tippy-pawsing back into the hotel at 8:00 in the morning. And there was still a whole lot of action in the lobby, which was common back then because it was a gathering place. And I sat down and I was enjoying a drink and talking to some friends. And this beautiful young Black man came up to me. And he said, "Miss Johnson, may I talk to you?" And it's the first time I'd ever been addressed as Miss Johnson because that was my mom. And sure. And I'm looking at this young thing, probably in his mid-20s, just beautiful and proud. And he said, "You did a workshop last year at Living in Leather." And I remember the workshop. I was the baby on Mount Olympus, so to speak, sitting with the people that I admired, which was a little nerve-wracking in of itself. But anyway, he said, "You said something that gave me courage and pride, and I'm still trying to figure out what's going on here." As it turns out, this young man's name was Roland Bynum, and he was the lover, partner, and boy of a very well-known artist that we call the Hun, whose name was Bill Schmeling. And his master was white and he was Black. And he had both been proud and afraid of the situation he was in because he was a young Black man serving his white partner. And I remembered the workshop the year before because I had talked about how to love, what my collar meant. And if you don't like how I love, get out of my life, get out of my bedroom, and take your opinions somewhere else. Because quite frankly, Scarlett, I don't give a damn. And he said, hearing that from someone else who looked like him gave him the courage to stand up. Now, until then, Ruby, I've been going the merry way, standing in my truth, speaking what I believe to be true. but I had never thought about the words that I had used. You know, kind of like a ship that's moving forward. You don't think about where your wake is going. And when that young man stood in front of me and said, I won my title because of you, because I was brave enough to stand in my truth, it was an oh my God moment.
Mm.
And it was when I realized that I was basically the prow of the ship, and there were others who were riding in the wake of that boat.
Mhm.
And that, like any good ship, I was breaking the water for those that came behind me. And I had never thought about it until then. And believe me, when your words come back and stand in front of you, you learn pretty quickly
Yeah.
that there is a wonderful price or a very bitter price, depending on what you've done, to standing as who you are. If you have stood in your own truth and are proud of the person in the mirror, then those who come after you, who have a little less turbulence, so to speak, in the water because they're protected by your boat, will be stronger and faster and bigger and bolder when you pull into dock. Or if you've stood in your own bullshit, you leave an awful lot of turbulence that can rock the boats that come after you. Which do you choose?
Right. Wow, that is beautiful. You also sent me, I'm going to wrap with this. You sent a poem to me via email. Do you remember?
It's part of a longer poem, and I believe it's James Weldon Johnson. It was written on the 50th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation.
Mm-hmm.
And he's talking about our right to be here. In the beginnings of it, brothers mine, today we stand where half a century sweeps our kin, since God through Lincoln's ready hand struck off our bonds and made us men. And he goes on, but he says, never let the thought arise that we are here on sufferance bare, outcast and asylum beneath these skies, aliens without part or share. This land is ours by right of birth. This land is ours by right of toil. Our sweat is in its sacred earth. We helped to turn its virgin soil. And it is one of my favorites because it spoke 100 years ago of the bullshit that was being thrown at us, that we didn't deserve to be here, or we were lazy, or we were trifling, or we were whatever, because we were no longer willing to give our sweat without the compensation that our work was worth. And as I look at this next generation as they come up, I remind them that their sweat is in this community. Never, ever let the thought arise that you are here with privilege, because you're not. If the title is yours, believe me, you earned it. Somebody didn't give it to you. Your sweat is in this sacred earth. You are doing what you do because you deserve it. And maybe even more than that, because you had to claw your way up to get it. So if I can in any way make that a little bit easier so that they can bloom in many ways like Johnson, all I'm going to do is remind them, you are not outcast, asylumed beneath these skies. You created the sunshine that shines down on you.
Yes. What a beautiful way to close it. Oh, that was beautiful. I got chills listening to you recite. I was just reading it. It's like, oh, it's so good. But I do want you to share what's next coming up. You shared that there is an event happening this fall where the library will be.
What's actually next has kind of surprised me, mostly because my kids don't know how to take no for an answer.
Okay.
They started following me around with a microphone, which can be very embarrassing on occasion. But they've created actually two YouTube channels. One is just mom/grandmom telling stories. But the other one is the library's YouTube channel, and it's some unboxings, some interviews, an awful lot of fun as the library builds. That's been kind of fun to watch grow. The other one next is the Scholars Project of
Okay.
actually getting our young great minds to come and effectively touch their ancestors. We call it a library. The reality is it's a story circle. And the stories of all those who have walked before you are there. Touch them. That's what it's there for. And since originally we were chartered to travel in order to bring who we are to the communities we serve, and we still move a library or two when COVID allows, assuming COVID will allow, we can get back to some of the schedules that we normally kept, one of which is for the MSC conference in DC. We'll be bringing an annex, and the library has 7 of them, maybe 8 after tonight, I'm not sure, to Women of Drummer. And possibly bringing an annex to Southeast Leatherfest.
Oh, wow.
So that'll be kind of fun. Because the women of WILA, Women in Leather Atlanta, are the caretakers for the Carter Johnson in Atlanta and travel with it when they are requested. And Self pretty much knows if the Atlanta annex is out, the old dog is probably going to take a trip down to Atlanta and hang out with the kids for a while. And so getting back on the road is going to be an awful lot of fun. I would remind them that I'm 3 years older than the last time we lifted those boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And as the library project has expanded, bringing more people to the library to touch their history is just an expansion of getting our tribe and their ancestors together.
Oh, wow. I have like heart flutters in my chest. It's been so emotional for me. So good. So good. You are a great storyteller. Such a beautiful storyteller. So where can you said your YouTube channel, just they go to Carter Johnson YouTube channel?
Actually, yes, Carter Johnson Library YouTube or Mama Vi YouTube. Okay. I am encouraging everyone to come and enjoy the Facebook group.
Okay.
Put in questions, start with comments, observations, stories. It's a wonderful way to preserve all of those voices because we download a lot of it about once a year, just so we know who's contributing and what some of the favorite themes are.
Okay.
So come and contribute to the library group. You can find it on Facebook fairly easily. Mm-hmm. And all of the annexes have groups as well. So get into 2 or 3 groups.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so where can they find you other than Facebook and YouTube, any other place?
The library has its own website, although we're working on it. Mm-hmm. Pretty much, if you scream, "Where is Mama Vi?" loud enough, somebody is going to tell you.
Because that's what happened, because I had emailed to the Carter Johnson Library, but it's probably like, they probably get so much. So I was like, I need to find personal email. Just like that, in 5 minutes, I had your personal email. So
they can find me personally on Facebook as well.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Very accessible is what you're saying. Very accessible.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for this. This has been wonderful. And thank you, everyone. So.